Before we get into our show, we feel now is the best time to tell you that Scarifyer is a proud supporter of Rue Morgue. Rue Morgue is the world's leading horror and culture and entertainment brand, spearheaded by its multiple award-winning magazine, Rue Morgue and Rue Morgue Digital. But if reading is not your thing, that's okay, because Rue Morgue TV, the official YouTube channel, as well as Rue Morgue Cinema, which produced the acclaimed original film The Last Will and Testament of Rosalind Lee. So head over to ruemorgue.com and subscribe to Rue Morgue Magazine for your bi-monthly slice of horror culture and entertainment today.
To a new world of gods and monsters.
I can see it all before me. You won't get far.
I need hands up front for your stretcher. Who are they?
There is something calling them all here. I've seen this place before.
Everything has led to this. You will become something remarkable.
They did killings and sacrifices to make people change.
Nothing else matters now.
This isn't the end.
Statistically, you're more likely to die in a hospital than anywhere else.
All right, you psychos, it is Friday, which means it is Scarifyer, and today we are talking all things The Void from 2016. I am the Ace.
I am the Gov.
And I'm Quinn.
And we have a very special guest today. Quinn, why don't you introduce our special guest?
All right, guys, we have the one and only Corey Stevenson from Podcasting After Dark. Corey, how are ya?
I'm doing good. There might be a couple more Corey Stevensons out there, but only one on Podcasting After Dark. That's for sure.
And that's the important thing.
Right?
Only one Corey Stevenson matters.
That's right.
Why am I thinking of Lord of the Rings? One ring to rule them all.
One Corey to rule them all.
Exactly.
Well, as a kid growing up in the 80s, there were a few other Coreys as well, so.
The Coreys.
The Coreys.
The Coreys.
So, Corey, before we get going with the review of the movie, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your podcast?
Yeah, my buddy Zach and I, we do a weekly show called Podcasting After Dark, where we like to dive deep into some cult movies from our nostalgic past. So most of the time, you know, we're not looking at them to necessarily review the movies. We're going into them assuming that we already like them because we have nostalgia for them. But like with movies like Cyborg, we discover they don't quite hold up as well as we think that they do. But for the most part, they do. And we have a lot of fun on that show. We've been around for about 2 years now. We review movies on a bi-weekly basis, so every other week, and then in between that, we do some spin-off shows like TV Obscura and The Watch List, which we'll have to have you guys on at some point in the very near future.
For sure.
And it's a lot of fun. We just like talking about these crazy movies. Anything from like Vice Squad with Wings Hauser to, I don't know, Prince of Darkness by John Carpenter, which has a lot, or I should say The Void has a lot of love for John Carpenter, so it's kind of appropriate there. And I love Prince of Darkness. So if you guys want to listen to me and Zach talk about movies like Prince of Darkness for 4+ hours at a go, well, Podcasting After Dark is your spot.
Very cool, very cool. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. Gov, give us that backstory.
All right. Co-director Jeremy Gillespie recalled overhearing Guillermo del Toro state while working on the unfinished At the Mountains of Madness that he wanted to do an H.P. Lovecraft film like that has never been done before. After hearing this, Gillespie felt that this sort of got the wheels in my mind working, trying to think of what that might be. The creature effects were crowdfunded on Indiegogo and raised, while the film's funding was done through traditional channels by the production company. It premiered at the 2016 Fantastic Fest and later at the Toronto After Dark Film Festival. The film was given a limited theatrical release on May 21st, 2017 in the United Kingdom and the United States, and on April 17th in Canada, initially opening in 31 theaters before expanding to 50. The Void received positive reviews from critics, with many comparing it to the films of the 1980s, and it grossed just under $150,000 at the box office.
Very cool, very cool. So, this movie is clearly a love fest to 80s horror,
Yeah.
which I certainly appreciate. First time everybody watched it, what did we think?
What a ride.
What was that?
What just happened?
WTF.
Exactly.
But in a good way.
It escalates so quickly. It like goes from like 0 to 60.
Sure.
It's insane.
Yeah, there's very little time to breathe in this movie. I think it's very well paced.
Yeah.
At this point, my viewing of it, I watched it with my wife last night. Both of us, this was probably like our third or fourth viewing, so we're both big fans of this film. But it's one of those movies where every time I watch it, I actually like it more because I think I pick up on more things that they sort of layer in.
Like more like nods to the 80s genre, or...
Yeah, and I think that's I pick up on more things the more times that I've seen this. Like I said, it's been about 3 or 4 times that I've watched it, and I do pick up on little clues and hints here and there. But overall, I think it's a blast as far as the gore goes, and as far as the story that it's telling and what it's trying to do. First off, with the budget that it has, is impressive as hell.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
very true.
But they crowdfunded what, $82,000 for the special effects?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the co-director Steven Kostanski, he is the one that kind of works a lot on the effects side of things. He's also the director of Psycho Goreman.
Oh, okay.
Oh. See, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I definitely, when I was watching it, the only thing I kept thinking was, holy moly, did someone catch the license plate of that film? It was insane. And I guess the beauty of going into it blind, because I did no back research on this film, I just jumped right into it. I'm like, okay, we're watching The Void. Turned it on, and when I thought I knew they were going with it, I'm like, wow, okay, didn't see that coming, and here we are. I joked that when it was done, I go, you could pretty much call this the Night of the Living Hellraiser thing.
And throw in some From Beyond and The Beyond, Fulci's The Beyond, especially that ending and whatnot. There's so many homages in this film. Like for example, the ending that is very much an homage to Fulci's The Beyond ending, where the two leads are sort of stuck in hell and everything. Although I think this one is a bit more positive because they're not blinded by the evil that they see. But you're left with not knowing where things are going to go, which also has shades of Carpenter's Prince of Darkness and things like that. But I think that the movie does a great job of taking these homaged themes, because they could have just been straight ripoffs, but they incorporate these themes into a story that is an homage unto itself, a very H.P. Lovecraftian story, but it's also very much The Void's story, right? It's not like, oh, The Void is a retelling of the Mountains of Madness or something. No, it's The Void, but it's got all these nice little homages to other things inside of it.
Yeah, so that it was them doing a polite nod instead of just straight up ripping off another movie.
Exactly, yeah, and obviously a lot of times we see the latter more often, where someone rips it off and you just don't do it well, and they're like, oh, but it's an homage, and you're like, no, that's a rip-off right there, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas it's a hard line. It's a hard line to walk between homage and rip-off, and it kind of sometimes boils down to like, you know, like what the Supreme Court views as porn. It's like, I know it when I see it. Whereas, like, I know it's a ripoff when I see it, or I know it's an homage when I see it, but I can't quite put my finger on, like, what the difference is.
Right. One thing that I would like to point out, I think the thing that freaked me out most about this movie was that damn cult.
The cult?
Yeah.
The cult was creepy.
Yeah.
The cult was really creepy.
That was the creepiest part. They don't say anything. They don't really do that much, but they're just there, and that freaked me out the most.
Well, just the beginning of the film with setting the girl on fire in the first 2 minutes. I'm like, okay, you have my attention.
Yeah, and then the first time you watch it, you're like, oh, these two people are the monsters.
Right, these are the bad guys.
Yeah, these are the bad guys, and it's a complete 180 because, no, they're actually the good guys, and the girl that they burned, I mean, I guess she would have morphed, you know, like she was, and, you know, whatever the catalyst is that turns these people into these creatures, you know, I guess she would have morphed as well. So it's, the first time you watch, you're like, oh, God, this is freaking horrible. But, oh, wait, no, they're actually doing a good thing here by the end of it.
Right? Oh my God. It just, like Gov said earlier, 1 minute you think you're going straight, and then they pull you into a left-hand lane, and it's insane.
And I think a lot to do with is how well the acting is, too.
Yeah.
You know?
It was very well acted.
I agree.
The lead guy, I freaking love that dude, and I've never even seen him in anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very true. He carried the movie very well.
That's kind of, you know, the beautiful thing about unknowns.
Yeah.
You really get into the performance, especially if they're good.
Yeah.
You know, and it just adds that much more to a story.
And he does a great job of, like, not being like a muscle-bound hero protagonist. He's that like the everyday style protagonist that can still, by the end of it, you know, step up to the plate and do what has to be done. And by the way, have you guys seen Prince of Darkness?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes.
Well, at the conclusion of the movie, you know, especially the ending, I was like, oh, it's Prince of Darkness. All right.
yeah. When he tackles them, you know, into the, like, it's very akin to the lady tackling the creature in Prince of Darkness. And although Prince of Darkness still has that one shot of her reaching back, you know, as the portal closes, and I'm still infinitely haunted by that one, you know, 2-second shot. But this does a great job of that. And like I said, you know, it's not a straight ripoff of Prince of Darkness, but it's an homage because, you know, I guess because the setup's a little bit different, but it's there, and you're like, okay, we know where you're getting your DNA from, and a lot of it is John Carpenter, and a lot of it's also The Thing, you know, not just Prince of Darkness, but it's also The Thing.
So then there's a really good question. Would you consider this movie a, like, body horror movie or like a creature horror movie?
I guess it's a good mixture of both.
Yeah.
I mean, and, you know, the creatures you end up seeing at the end. I was telling Gov before we started, it was like Brundlefly meets The Thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Brundlefly.
I mean, that ending area. Yeah, I agree. It's both. It's monstrous and it's body horror and cultish, and, you know, has a lot of Cronenberg DNA in it and everything. It's especially those end monster creatures, and then the birth of the daughter of Dr. Powell's daughter creature.
Yes.
Like, that whole thing is practical effects, and my God, thank God for it. You know, thank God that they went practical in this movie, and because of it, I think this movie will hold up in 20 years from now.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That was the first thing that won me over, especially newer movies, and I say this all the time on the show. You do practical effects and less CGI, you've won me over. You know, especially with newer movies. I hate CGI blood. I hate CGI fire, but, you know.
I heard in your Texas 3D one, you were talking about how much you hated the CGI
God,
fire.
dude.
Fire's the worst thing to do in CGI. Never do fire.
It's so god awful, and it's so lazy.
It is.
But yeah, so it was refreshing to see just about everything in there practical. So I applaud them for that.
It does make you wonder, if they didn't get the funding from Indiegogo, what would this movie have looked like? Like, would they have gone with CGI, tried to maybe make it a little bit cheaper? I don't know, but I love what they did with the practical effects that they had. And the Blu-ray has a great making of, documentary behind the scenes, and it shows them working on it and everything, and especially the end shot where he's running through that hallway as it's closing on him. That's a really cool shot. And if you see how they did it behind the scenes, it's like, it's all plywood and stuff like that. But I mean, I think a lot has to do with the cinematographer of this film. I think this film is beautifully shot. Yeah. Especially, like we said, with the cultists earlier. All the shots with the cultists, I think, are freaking cool as hell.
I'll propose a what if with the idea of if they didn't crowdfund for practical effects. Say they had to shoot things more dimly lit and more suggested than actually showing things. Would that made the movie scarier? I mean, we're going to talk.
They could have pulled a Jaws scenario, right? Like,
sure.
It could have been turned out more Jaws-esque. I think seeing how well it's crafted at this level, I can only imagine that it would be equally crafted well at a lower budget because the people working on it are so talented.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing about films like this is when you have those practical effects and the cinematography, I think it really does speak to the creativity and the artistic ability of everyone involved in it. And that's not something that you see as much nowadays because we do rely on that CGI and technology. So I applaud that.
Yeah, and while we're on the topic of the end, like the climactic part with all the monsters, the only thing that takes me out of the entire movie is that one monster that walks on his hands with his head upside down. Yeah. Because that is one specific actor, and you've seen him in so many movies, and he only does that one thing. And so every time I'm like, oh, it's that guy. It's that guy. And it looks great. It looks absolutely amazing. But once I've learned that he only does that one, because he's like, triple jointed or something, he only does that one thing. And I'm like, okay, that guy. All right. But other than that, I'm completely sucked into the movie other than that one moment.
It's definitely a movie that grabs you and it does not let you go.
Alright, the Gov is going to tell you real quick how to bring the horror into your own home with a handmade soy wax candle from American Nightmare Candle Company. The scents are inspired by locations iconic to the horror genre, places like the Overlook Hotel, Sleepy Hollow, and Elm Street. Each fragrance combination is carefully curated to transport you into the story, and the catalog is ever evolving. So head over to Etsy or to AmericanNightmareCandles.com and get 10% off when you use the code Scarifyer at checkout. This deal only makes sense, so get your American Nightmare candle today.
So one of the other things I wanted to kind of bring up is I was kind of expecting this movie to be almost like a virus movie type idea, especially when I saw the nurse pulling the scissors out of that guy's eye, and
which was my favorite shot in this film.
And,
that was great.
And I'm like, okay, so it's like a virus, and then you go to that sound, you see the blood on the floor, and you hear that wiggling sound, and I'm like, oh god, no, it's not a virus. And then you see that thing coming out of her mouth, and I'm not even kidding, out loud I went, what the fuck is that thing? This movie takes so many turns.
My only confusion about the movie, yes, is that, are these people infected with something that comes out of them? And I understand that, what the doctor's trying to do, and the doctor being very similar to Dr. Pretorius in From Beyond, the another H.P. Lovecraft film with Barbara Crampton, from the 80s. And, I understand that he's trying to basically have the people live forever, but your body can't handle that, and that's why you turn into that sort of like once you die, you turn into whatever that is. It kind of unleashes out of you.
Yeah.
But I guess the one thing I didn't understand about the backstory of the movie, and it doesn't, I guess, ultimately doesn't matter, is are all the cultists infected with something until they die, and when they die, they turn into whatever that is, you know, and that's the only part that I was a little bit confused by.
Yeah, I got a little stuck on that too. I'm like, so how does it work? Because some people die and they come back, and then some other people die and they don't come back. So is it like something that like he gave them, or
that's what I assumed.
I'm assuming
because Dr. Powell was obviously doing experiments down in the hospital basement, so I assumed he was infecting people with something, whatever this, key to resurrection or to defeat death, whatever it is.
So is then that how the first nurse that changes got it? Like he gave her something, or?
Yeah, I think she was in on it. I think that nurse was a part of it. I think obviously the daughter was a part of it. I think her grandpa was not.
Yeah.
He didn't know because he didn't come back. And now that I'm like thinking about it, did the only two people that died and came back were female, right? It was the nurse, and then it was the daughter. So maybe Dr. Powell was, and then the body that they burned at the very beginning was also female.
Yeah.
So maybe Dr. Powell only does this to the females in the cult, and then of course obviously to himself as well, because he's the only guy that we saw get killed and then come back, correct? Because the other sheriff, the older sheriff that you think's going to rescue the day, save the day, he gets killed, but he doesn't come back from it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess then that would track, because that makes sense. He's obsessed with bringing back his daughter, so
right.
Who
rebirth
can birth something that would be women. So that makes total sense.
Yeah, so maybe it's just the women, and maybe he uses because also the drug guy, the drug kid from Letterkenny, he talks about how he drugged us and made us have sex with everybody. So maybe all the women have he has the experiment on them. He's creating the host for his daughter to come into, but he doesn't need to do that for the males, but he obviously needs the semen, to create life and everything, to give birth and whatnot. So that maybe you know what, that is one thing I like about the movie. It seems that even though I don't always understand what they're doing, I always felt like the directors did. I always felt like the creators knew exactly what came before this. Like they knew exactly what was happening around this, but we're only seeing this cross section here.
Gotcha. That actually could be interesting, because then that gives them more expandability for possibly another movie. Like dive into it a little bit deeper.
I mean, I think there's a very fertile ground of doing even a prequel, a side thing, heck, even a comic book. But some of the things that I liked was how big the idea was. I love that siren sound that you hear, and at first I was like, oh, is that just a part of the score? But then someone mentions it that they can hear it in the movies world. So I was like, okay, cool. So there's it's like the whole town or the whole county is in on this, know, and the siren goes off. I'm like, this is crazy cool. Like this is they're, for such a small budget film, all the concepts that they're playing with are huge concepts, and they're pulling them off, honestly.
Honestly, if you look at this film, it doesn't look like it had such a small budget because of what they do with it. And I hate to say it, I'm going to sound like a total nerd, but they MacGyvered it, and I love that.
They absolutely did. They did.
Money well spent. They knew what they were doing with it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Q-tip,
absolutely.
Pocket knife, shopping mall. Boom.
and again, I highly recommend watching the documentary on the Blu-ray, because not just for the behind the scenes stuff, but also to just see how creative they were with the money that they had and how they put everything together.
Yeah, that actually would be really interesting to see.
Yeah, for sure.
So I gotta ask everybody, what part freaked out everybody the most? I've already said mine. That freaking cult.
The cult freaked you out?
Well, I mean, I know what I want to say, but I don't know if I can say it.
I'd have to go Gov, the first scene with the scissors in the eyes, and she turns around, her face is missing.
Yeah, it's undeniable.
I was going to ask, what is up with that? They keep removing their skin. Did I miss something with that?
I kind of took it as like, well, it's very much like Nightbreed, where he was trying to be like, my true face is underneath of this.
Yeah.
And it's, and they really, I'm with you. I was like, okay, why do you keep wanting to do that? Now, granted, Dr. Powell, he looked a lot different when he finally took all of his pieces off.
Yeah.
But the nurse lady, it's like she just still looked like she was just cutting her face off. But then again, she wasn't dead at that point, she kind of just went crazy. It's almost as if she kind of like went off script a little bit, like if Dr. Powell was there, he'd be like, no, what are you doing? Not yet.
That's not what I meant.
Yeah, it's almost as if she went a little bit, not quite the way he wanted it to go. And exactly. Well, what's up with that? I hate, and that freaks me out. The idea of peeling off your own skin. Oh
yeah,
God, that freaks me out.
It's almost like typical cult fashion. Do what the leader says, follow the leader, even though you're not at that level yet. Even though you're not really there yet.
Yeah, she wasn't quite there yet, but she wanted to just jump the gun and start peeling her face off.
Yeah.
But I'd say, I loved a lot of it, but some of the freakiest stuff, honestly, for me, is the end when they're in that other dimension and. Like, where do you go from there? Are you now, like, not dead? So, like, you have to live forever, in that dimension or something? And because it's like Prince of Darkness or The Beyond. It's like those are the things that linger with me. Like, I'm not religious, but, like, growing up in a Roman Catholic household, like, the idea of going to hell is terrifying. The idea of going to hell when you kind of didn't deserve it, like if you sort of just got sucked there by accident or something, is to me even more terrifying. So, like, the ending is just, for me, is what gives me the willies and just kind of like lingers with me,
Yeah, it's almost like that what's next question that is kind of haunting. It kind of looms over the ending of this film. Like, is it like a purgatory type idea, or like you said, are they not dead and they're just kind of stuck? Is there a way for them to get back? And what the hell is the triangle? You know?
And where did Dr. Powell go? Because he tackled Dr. Powell through there, and then is Dr. Powell that triangle now? Did he become a god there? It's so cool. And I know that there's kind of no answers, and I kind of hate when creators say that we did this just to get your imagination going. And I mean, like, Carpenter does that too. But I do kind of sometimes think that that's kind of cheap, and I do wish and I do hope that the creators know what the ending is, even if it's vague enough for us. I do hope that they know what they were trying to say with that ending.
Yeah, I mean, again, and there's more, I guess, questions than answers, because you can even trace that back to, like, how did even Dr. Powell discover this? You know what I mean? Like, what did he do to stumble across this? And also, me personally, I felt like the cult, as cool as it was a little underutilized. I mean, they just kind of they were just kind of there. What do they believe in, or do they just follow Dr. Powell?
Yeah, right. I think the most fascinating part of this movie is the cult. I mean, we're obviously seeing the end result of what they're trying to do, but I'm with you. I would like to actually know, like, what their goals were, how many people were a part of this cult, like what does it sort of look like before all this happens? How did the doctor come across his knowledge? In the movie, he says it's funny what you can find when you go searching for it, and that's fine enough. I don't mind that vague answer. I was
about to say, he leaves it vague on purpose.
Yeah, and you could just assume that he just went into down a very dark occult path. And as someone who's read up on some of that stuff, the information's out there if you want to try to find it, and that I kind of liked that. But like you said, I would like sort of even a prequel. I would take like a little prequel comic book, like a little one-shot prequel comic book, sort of setting up what's going on. Now, I wouldn't have wanted to read it before the movie, because I love how the movie is structured, like we said, with, you know, we thinking those guys are the bad guys at the beginning and, you know, whatnot. But I would love to have had a comic book to read afterwards.
My, I guess, question, I want to know what you guys think. The teenage girl who's giving birth to Dr. Powell's baby. I'm assuming that, like we had said earlier, she was in on it. And then she kills her, spoilers, by the way, sorry, forgot to say. She kills her grandfather because she wholeheartedly believes that this is like a destiny type thing. And then when she asks Dr. Powell to bless the baby, he touches her. And you see like a quick flash of something, and then she completely freaks the fuck out, almost like she is almost like awakened or she changes her mind or something.
It all became horribly real for her at that moment.
Exactly. So here's a question. Did she believe in this cult type thing? Or was it the fact that she was almost under, like, I don't want to say like a spell or something like that, but almost like under an influence of some kind?
Remember, this is, I mean, kind of a cult, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure, you know, as we look at history of cults,
Yeah.
Say like Jim Jones.
Nexium.
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 Yeah. You know, I'm sure a lot of
The
people,
Vow of the Void.
you know, I'm sure a lot of people, you know, was all about everything he had to say and preach until the Kool-Aid came out.
Oh, yeah!
What happened there? Very few survivors freaked out, got out of there, but... So, I mean, I look at it as that's probably what it was. She was all about it until reality hit,
But,
you know?
but what did she see?
Well,
I think it was more of a feeling. I think she felt it. Like she, I mean, I think what we saw is what she's feeling. And she's feeling her baby explode into, like, her normal baby explode into some weird monstrosity, you know?
I gotcha.
And I think, and I'm with you guys on that. Like, I think she had full cognitive, you know, control over herself. Obviously killing her grandpa, I think, you know, that was probably like, yes, it's all destiny type of thing. But yeah, when she felt it, you know, like, I think that was a hard punch of reality right there in her gut.
Almost like a holy shit, what have I been doing?
Yeah.
Holy shit, what have I done wrong? And then she had one of the worst deaths, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
That was
Easily.
freaking horrible.
Now, I'm not gonna lie, it was a little humorous to kind of watch this creature thing drag her behind it.
Yes, that was cool.
Like,
That was cool.
I'm not gonna lie, that it explodes and then she kind of gets drugged behind. So, I mean, hey,
Well, doesn't this kind
going
of...
down with the ship.
Right. Doesn't this kind of say something about, you know, a fear that a lot of expecting mothers have about, like, what's growing inside of me?
Yes.
Like, it kind of touches on that kind of phobia.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. Being a male, I imagine so, yes. I don't know. I don't truly know, but I assume so.
No, it's interesting when you see the first ultrasound of your child and you think it's going to be this wonderful magical thing, and then that little fetus turns its face toward the camera, and then you think, my God, I'm giving birth to a fucking demon. What is happening?
And then it winks at you.
Then you get worried. Just saying.
But with that, I did love the themes of birth and then also loss between the characters, with the doctor lost his daughter, and then our two protagonists, they obviously lost a child, and that ended up dissolving their relationship and stuff like that. So I loved that theme throughout the movie.
Yeah.
Sure.
So if she, now let me ask you guys this: if she gave birth, would the doctor have done something with it, right? Or were they not a part of the cult, so he wouldn't have? He was just doing his doctor thing. And then my next question is, or the second half of that, or second part of that is, did he mess with something and that's why the baby died?
Of the main protagonists?
Yeah, the couple, the nurse and the cop.
I mean, me personally, again, that's one of the cool things about this movie. It's all up to interpretation. It's kind of cool. The way I took it was they lost their son, and I think the doctor kind of saw it as an opportunity kind of, because when she sees that her stomach is moving, he's like, you know, this is like a redemption. You get to be a mother, that thing that you never got to fulfill. So I don't think he necessarily did anything to their son, but I think that he saw an opportunity, you know?
Okay.
That's how I
think
took it.
I'm with you. That's kind of the path I'm on as well.
Yeah. So then here's another question, because that's the second person that kind of like hallucinated in this movie, because the other one was the son when his dad is attacking him, and he's like,
was that his dad or was that his father-in-law?
I thought it was supposed to be his dad, because in the credits for it they say the father and the son.
Ah, gotcha. Okay, gotcha.
So these two people are hallucinating about this. So it's like, what's making them hallucinate? Is it just like exhaustion, or is there something in the air?
I took it that they're in a liminal space anyways, because they're in a space that's technically going to close from this reality, even though weirdly, you know, it looks like part of the hospital, but it'll eventually close. Yeah. So I take it as like they're in this, they're these, you know, physical people that are also sort of inhabiting this weird liminal space that's not in our reality, and there it's like all over the place. So they're catching glimpses of stuff. And I liked it when the father figure guy was getting killed and attacked. He was telling his son to burn him, kill him. Yeah. You know, I liked he looked behind, you know, standing behind the son was the wife or whatever standing there, the ghost of her, you know.
Yeah.
And it's cool because they never like. Before they kind of zoomed in on it, but that shot they didn't, and I like that. I like it when it was just more of in the background thing. But yeah, I took it as they're just inhabiting they're in a different world, and it's messing with like their perception of reality, essentially.
I can see that. Yeah, that would make sense. That would make a lot of sense. Did you remember?
I did like the set, the final set with the triangle wall thing.
Yes.
You know, I thought that was super cool. Like I love the way the light was coming through the triangle. It looked awesome.
Again, it's those little subtle things that usually are the most impressionable and stunning.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to have $300 million to do it.
And that's what's probably most impressive about this movie, is that it was such a low budget, but yet it looks so good.
So good, yeah.
It gives you hope, you know, for the future of horror movies.
Man, if they make them more like this, yeah.
Yeah.
Can we? No, I'm sorry, Corey. Go ahead.
I was going to ask if there was stuff that you guys didn't like about the film.
That's a great question.
I don't like the fact that the one guy took the other guy's fruit cup. That was rude. That bothered me.
Touche.
I mean, I guess my only real gripe with it is the lack of answers about how vague it is. You know, a lot is left up to interpretation, which I know is good, and in this case it works. But maybe just a little bit more of, like I said earlier, how did Dr. Powell figure this out? How did he discover this? Were the females who worked for him in the hospital in on it? You know what I mean? And like I said, again, a little bit more background on the cult. Who are they? Who are the followers? Again, it could be answered in something you said, Corey, like a graphic novel. You know, you don't necessarily have to do like a prequel film or anything like that, but just a little bit more context is honestly the only gripe I had with it.
I would agree. I think that'd be my same gripe. Because if you watch the trailer for this thing, you know, they really kind of double down on the creepy cult.
Yeah.
And you don't really...
They sell it as a cult film, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a little bit more about the cult, you know, a little more, meat, you know, with the potatoes, but there really wasn't much bad about this movie. It was just...
Yeah, it's kind of hard to find faults in it.
It's a good, low-budget, creepy horror movie.
Yeah. If I could have literally just one answer from the entire film, where did the cultists go when it was over? Like when the son was walking out. And,
exactly.
That was my only... And you see the one body on the ground with its head just like exploded, and my wife was like, oh, did she crush that person's head or something, the girl that was hiding. And I was like, I always assume so, but now I'm almost wondering if all the cultists' heads exploded when it ended.
Right. If that's the case, I would have loved to see that.
Because I know, and that's the thing. I was like, so that led me to thinking like, oh, if that is the case, well, damn, I would have loved to have seen just a bunch of people's heads exploded like left and right. But like the only reason I came to that conclusion is because I just didn't see that character doing that to that cultist. But I guess she did, like, because I did set it up with that one cultist sort of creeping up on her, in the closet. But yeah, I was like, I just was like, where did they go? Like, did they know it's over? Like, how do they know it's over, right?
It's really hard to find something to not like about the film. The only thing, again, I'm just so many questions still left. But again, I can't really complain about that because that's something that could be easily mended. No, I really don't have anything that I don't like about this film. It was really enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, you could even have it explained, even if they like try to go a sequel route. You could have that explained at the very beginning of the sequel, as to give the whole backstory on what happened. But yeah, and I'm with you guys. Like, these are the only minor gripes that I have, but it's so freaking minor, right? And I do actually like not having the answers. I kind of enjoy that because I can fill it in myself. And a lot of times, imagination is a great thing, and I do like filmmakers that force us to think about things. Although here I do believe it's by design, with them paying homage to these classic films that they were clearly paying homage to.
Sure, I mean, and it goes again against the grain of like mainstream movies these days. Oh god, every single thing has to be explained to you.
Yeah.
Sure.
And it almost treats like the audience are a bunch of idiots, you know what I mean? Because they have to explain every little thing and stuff like that.
But
and I hate that so much.
But that's the nice thing about films like this is it's very Alfred Hitchcock. And that's what I like about it. Alfred Hitchcock said the most terrifying thing is the human mind. Because he firmly believed in it's scarier when you don't know because your mind just goes a million miles a minute. And obviously I'm paraphrasing that part. But I firmly believe that, not knowing is way scarier than seeing everything and having everything explained.
Yeah, I mean that's why Jaws works too, because you don't get to see it all the time and all I completely agree with that, and I do agree with the power of the viewer's imagination to kind of fill in the gaps. And like I said earlier, the only thing I ask is that the filmmaker themselves knows what the answer is, even if they don't put it out there, because I think a lot of times, you and I see it a lot of times with like the J.J. Abrams stuff, and I'm not going to hate on J.J. Abrams, but a lot of times he'll put like an idea or put a question into a movie that he says someone else will figure out later, and he literally
Star
goes
Wars.
on record and
Just say it.
He goes on record saying that. And yes, George Lucas didn't know everything that was coming, but he didn't put he didn't put questions in a box just to have a question in a box. And that's what J.J. Abrams does. And I hate that because we know that J.J. Abrams himself doesn't even know what the answer is. So therefore there is no answer. Yeah. So I very much respect the fact that in this movie, it felt like like I said, the creators, Gillespie and Kostansky, they knew, that the main lead's father was the one that was involved with that fire and everything. And they knew all the backstory stuff that came before this, but we only get little pieces of dialogue. We only get little glimpses, but it still makes cohesive sense because the creators know what the timeline is.
Exactly. They know full and well that it's something that's going to have people wanting more. And I agree with that. I like that.
So who thinks that this movie has the legs to continue? Do you think we'll be seeing a sequel or any kind of follow-up to this?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think I would want a sequel for this, but I think that there is enough meat on the bones to do it if it was done right. that's lame because I think you could do any sequel right. You know, like any story can be done right. But I do think that there could be something here, but I don't necessarily want it. I am happy with this being a one and done thing.
I think it'd be cool to see like a spin-off about the cult and the cult only.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, like
Okay.
even if
Yeah.
they're doing something else, like even if you took the cult like to another continent or something, right? Like
Yeah.
or even do something like where you actually start doing like the Mouth of Madness or something, or the Mountains of Madness, and you know there's this expedition, and you don't say it, but you start putting like maybe triangle logos on things. Like I would love that. I would love for it to be some sort of like not official sequel, but in something else in the same universe as The Void.
Yeah, I can get behind that. I do think this is a good standalone film, but I do think this movie has a lot of avenues and options and availability to have extensions or prequels. The options are endless. That's the nice thing about it, but I think it's also good as a standalone.
Yeah. And the cool thing is there's like so many like fun ways, you know, like so many more fun things you could do with the body horror that you'd want to see, and so many more awesome creatures that you'd want to see. I mean, heck, you could even, I was watching, I'm like, this could be a video game. It felt like very Resident Evil-esque. How about this? What if you not remake it, but like retell this story, retell The Void, but in video game form? I think that would work very well.
That'd be cool.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah, I think I'm with the masses on this one. There is a lot of room to expand. There's different things you could do, and as you said, Corey, like you could put that triangle anywhere, and you can do anything with it. It's up to so many different interpretations. I think I agree with everyone in saying that, yeah, this is a pretty good one and done film. This is a very well made indie film that if you just left it alone, it'll be fine. But there's also room, there's a universe they established. There's something they could definitely do with it.
Yeah.
I mean, and it sort of already inhabits the H.P. Lovecraft universe anyway. So even if you didn't want to give it its own universe, you could, you could just say that it belongs in that universe. And I think it does very well as an H.P. Lovecraft movie. And I mean, I've read a few H.P. Lovecraft things. I'm not very well read, but I have read a few things. And obviously there are some problematic elements to the H.P. Lovecraft stuff from back in the day. But I think this does an admirable job of like distilling down and basically being H.P. Lovecraft-esque. Sans the rampant racism.
Right. Yes.
Well, that's a relief.
yeah, exactly. And did you guys have you guys seen Color Out of Space at all?
I have been waiting to see that. That is on my list to see, but I haven't gotten around to it yet.
If you like this, I think you'll like that as well. Obviously, that is an adaptation, a straight adaptation of an H.P. Lovecraft movie. But this movie fits perfectly right next to it on the DVD shelf. Next to Color Out of Space, next to freaking Mouth of Madness, next to Prince of Darkness. I love this cosmic horror stuff, and it's so cool. Some of the awesome visuals that they do in this movie, like the rolling clouds, and then there's that one shot of that space cloud, that ominous space cloud looking thing, and it's like, why is that there? I don't know, but it's freaking cool, So sometimes you can't discount things for just being cool. Some things just work because they're freaking cool.
That's true.
Absolutely. Why don't we rank this thing?
Nothing left to do.
Right.
So, looking at the Internet Movie Database, they give The Void 5.9 out of 10. Not terrible. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 78.
There you go.
Metacritic gives it a 72, and 77% of Google users like this movie.
It's a little low, I would say.
Especially Rotten Tomatoes giving it a 78. That's pretty low.
It's rare that the critics like it better than the fans.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That is a rare thing.
So, Corey, how do you rank The Void?
1 out of 5.
1 out of 5. Honestly, if you asked me that after my first viewing, I probably would have said 3.5. But out of 3 or 4 viewings now, and like I said, I enjoy it more and more each time. Honestly, I got to give it 4.5 out of 5. I love this movie. I adore this movie, and I'm so happy that it exists.
Nice, very nice. Quinn?
I'm probably going to go ahead and give it a 4. If you say amateur number, I'll throw my microphone at you.
You just acknowledged it, so
okay,
well,
I did it for you. Okay. Just because of those questions that kind of do remain a little open and a little lack of explanation. But the reason why I'm not knocking it down any further is because I don't necessarily feel like I have to have the explanations. And it is enjoyable. It is fun.
Very good. Go.
Well, considering this was my first time seeing it, I will give it that 3.5. Mainly because, you know what? No, that's a above average review. Excuse you, because it was my first time watching it. But I will say this: even though watching it, I was scratching my head a lot, I was never bored.
Yeah.
I was never disinterested. I was always invested, and I was very intrigued on like what is. I wanted to know what is this. It was like almost like unwrapping the present box watching this movie, and amazing visuals, great lighting, great storytelling. The characters had story arcs. You gave a shit about them in the end, and then you can't speak enough for practical effects. So as of right now, I'll give it a 3.5. But you know what? I'm going to take Corey's advice. I'm going to watch it a few more times. Maybe it'll change.
I am going to too. I'm going to watch it multiple times. Listen, practical effects, especially in current horror movies, that automatically, gives me a 2.5 right there. So factoring everything else in, the story, it's engaging, it's not boring. I'm very comfortable after a first time watch giving it a 3.7. Just not quite a 4 yet, but more than a 3.5.
My number was average?
Yeah.
So.
Because I'm like chick.
So that's why I'll definitely watch it again, and for someone who's a fan of the body horror, the sci-fi horror, it's a definite recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's where I stand.
Yeah, I think we all agree that the practical effects is one of the biggest selling points of the movie, but the underrated selling point is the cinematography.
Yeah.
I just thought it was so much better shot than the budget had any right for it to be shot. That was very, very poorly worded, but you know what I mean. Like, It had no right looking as good as it looked on the budget that it was.
It was a beautiful film.
Exactly.
Yeah, beautiful. The lighting, everything was beautiful in it.
Yeah, so I definitely can't recommend this movie enough. It's one of those movies that I also kind of try to let people borrow, like, hey, you never seen this, go check this out, and I showed it to my brother-in-law. He loved it, and it's one of those movies that I love to introduce people to, because a lot of people do know it, but it's still kind of under the radar of a lot of like mainstream horror fans, and I think it deserves to have a lot more recognition than it does.
Yeah.
And ironically, for a movie called The Void, there's a lot in it.
Yeah, that's right. It is anything but The Void.
Yeah, and it deserves the title cult classic.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. It is a modern cult classic.
Absolutely. Very cool. Corey, one more time, plug yourself, man. Tell everybody where they can find you and your show.
Yeah, you can listen to me every week talking about cult movies on Podcasting After Dark with Zach, and actually on our Patreon page for Podcasting After Dark. And I do apologize for plugging this on your show, but we did interview the co-director, Steven Kostansky, so you can listen to that, and he's a super cool guy. We talked to him about a year ago, and he was wrapping up Psycho Goreman at the time, but he's really nice, really cool, very insightful into the film, so check that out if you can. Again, I do apologize for plugging Patreon on the show. But you can also listen, if you happen to like Seinfeld, by the way, I am every week on Cartwright, a Seinfeld podcast, talking all things Seinfeld with Adam, and we are on season 6, about 90 episodes deep. So
that's awesome. That's awesome.
But more so for the fans of Scarifyer, podcasting after dark is definitely more akin, probably. So.
Hey there, it's Quinn from Scarifyer. You ever have one of those days where you're out on the lake and the sun's going down, gazing into the eyes of that special someone, and then you realize, I brought my machete, but no hockey mask. So, if you're in a rush to make a killing, head over to 13X Studios and get your very own custom hockey mask. Mask creator Rick Stevenson takes a hands-on approach to every order to create the perfect mask to your specialized needs. Why would you settle for red triangles when you can shop an assortment of original styles and colors? Rick's clientele includes Nightmare Toys, Kevin Smith, and Kane Hodder. Head online to follow 13X Studio on all social media platforms. Then go over to 13X Studios on Etsy to put in your custom order today. Don't get caught with your mask off while devising your next decapitation. Go to 13xstudios.com.
Scarifyer.